We are really blessed to have all these people come forward to tell us about Palm City. Tonight's program is the history of Palm City, and these are people who live in Palm City or come from families that have lived in Palm City a long time. I'd like to introduce, let me try and get them in order. I don't have you all connected now, but Johnny Layton, raise your hand. Johnny.
Legend.
Member of the board, long time Palm City. Holly Hyatt, her father was my first vet. Yeah. And then Forrest Yingling, which one's Forrest? There you go. And Dennis, we went to school together. He tells me that all the time. And then Karen, Mallory, Morissette, and Karen's brother, Jerry. And they go way back. And Mary Ray Smith, Mary, there you go. I got everybody. Joanne Smith made it. I'm so glad you're here tonight.
Thank you.
We're going to miss Gary tonight, and you're really going to be on my side whenever it's all over, because Gary's supposed to be emceeing tonight, and he's feeling bad, okay? So hopefully you'll be better. And I'm not a real native of Palm City, but I spent about 20 years there. I lived in Palm City for about 20 years. And what we're talking about tonight mainly is 20 years before that. So, or more. Judy and I were in the first grade together. This is a connection. And I volunteer at the Heritage Museum, Monday and Tuesday. So if you've never heard about the Stiller part of Martin County, I'll tell you about it when you come by. Okay. So it's been a real pleasure. I was invited to be there for that, and I just want to say a little bit about how much history there is there. It's amazing. I never knew my family had such a part in Martin County's history. It's a short window, but it was a window. And it was an opening that started out with mosquitoes. There were enough mosquitoes for everybody to go around, okay? Yeah. All right, so Palm City had them too. All right. The program, we're going to start out tonight with, how long have you been in Palm City? Where were you born there? All right, can we start? Y'all got a mic on that end?
Mm-mm.
No, you're going to have that mic.
Can't have mine. We'll start right here with Mr. Mallory.
Okay. My sister and I moved here.
Hold it up to your mouth.
Yeah,
We moved here in 1945. We moved down from up just east of Cleveland. Our father had a job in a defense plant. When the war ended, he lost his job and decided to come down here and visit the grandparents. His mother and his stepfather had been down here since 1939 or 1940. And his stepfather had actually been down here as a young man before World War I. He was down here with his family. He moved back up north and then came back about 1939 or 40. So when the war ended and our father lost his job, we gassed up the Lincoln Zephyr and started out and came down to visit the grandparents.
How many days did it take back then to drive down here from up north?
Probably 4 or 5.
4 or 5.
Yeah. Yeah, just, you couldn't make very good time. There weren't any interstates or anything.
I know.
But after that, we used to go back up every couple of years in the summer and visit relatives. We had relatives in Pennsylvania and Ohio and all over the place. So we were back
Did
and
you
forth.
camp out or something going down?
Stopped in motels.
Motels? Yeah.
Let me say that as we go on, just feel free to participate.
They're doing
If you
it.
have a question you want to ask, we're open, okay?
Our grandfather's family were some of the original pioneers out on Loop Road. They were in Ohio, and of course Chillingsworth was advertising 10 acres of land and you would get a free lot in the city. Well, they bought that, they came down here, started an orange grove. My grandfather was more a teenager, so he was, but his two brothers are listed in the old Palm City School list of children. And they got frozen out, so they went back to Ohio. And Granddaddy he just couldn't wait to get back to the beautiful St. Lucie River. Oh boy. It was clear back then, and they could get anything they wanted to eat. All he talked about was Florida, Florida, Florida. Then he had to go into World War I. And then he met my grandmother after that. She had been divorced, and they married, and all he talked about was Florida, Florida, Florida. So as my brother said, in 1939, they came down here. But he was one of the original pioneers out there. And we used to ride out on Loop Road, and do you remember there was 2 cabbage palms right out by the road, and that Grandpa said that's where their drive went back into their land. But I couldn't find it now. The palms are gone a long time ago. Yeah. But anyhow, we came down. And I have to tell you this. Daddy said, now we'll go down and see the folks. We've never seen Florida. We'll go down and see the folks, and when I get back, I'll look for work. Well, when they got back, they decided to sell the house and come to Florida. I had 1 month in the 1st grade in Ohio, and they pulled me out. And then I had my 6th birthday on the trip down. So I know exactly when it was that we were. I have to tell you about Jerry and I'll let you guys talk in a minute. I have to tell you about Jerry and I. Now, Jerry's 2 years younger than I, and he doesn't remember some of the things. But when we left Ohio, Daddy bought this little house trailer. Well, you can imagine what it was like back then. And we pulled that. We pulled into a campsite in Orlando one night and was to stay the night. And my older brother, Ralph, was 6 years older, and he didn't want anything to do with us, So Jerry and I took off. We found the most wonderful, beautiful trees, and they had this gray hair hanging from it. Oh, it was wonderful, and we thought this would make the most wonderful wigs. We were indoctrinated to Florida real quick. Do you remember that?
They go ticks.
Oh, we got the red bugs. Oh. So we had that. Then we were just dumb Yankees. We didn't know anything. We went to the beach one day, and there were the most beautiful royal blue balloons all over the place. And we thought, we'll have fun popping these. Well, there was an old gentleman that was fishing, and he got a hold of my parents real quick. He said, don't let them. So we got through those 2 things, and we managed the sand spurs.
Yeah, that was
and we managed the Jacksonville beans. So and a sawgrass. We got through all that. So we pretty well had our show together after that. But boy, those wigs were pretty for a while.
We learned about the sand spurs in St. Augustine. It's Castillo de San Marcos. We stopped there on the way down, and I was barefoot, and I went running off across the grass there, and then I just stood there and screamed. And my father had had enough of me by that time. I guess I hadn't been very good on the trip, and he was going to go and really tie into me until he got up there and discovered that I was in the middle of the sand spurs.
Well, Granddaddy and Grandmother's houses are still, when you come across, I call it the old bridge, when you come across the bridge, where the high rise is, that's where the old hotel was that blew over in the hurricane. And then right next to that, there's the next four cottages. My grandfather built those. And they're still standing and people living in them, so, yeah.
Good deal. What hotel?
Well, I'm Joanne Blackstone Smith, And my parents, I was born in Miami. I wasn't born in Palm City. I was born in Miami. And my parents moved to Palm City, 39, 40, that part of the years. And my grandmother had a big old wooden house on 714 up there on a piece of property where now sits the Presbyterian Church in Palm City. And that's where we were raised, on that piece of property there in Palm City. And we had a little house behind my grandparents' house back there, just a little wooden house. And my father was on the dredge boats at that time when they were building the canals. He was a dredge boat man. And Mother didn't work at that time, but eventually Mother went to work for the A&P store, and she retired from the A&P store here, Catherine Blackstone. And so we lived in Palm City there, and it was a very wonderful childhood at that time. We had at the foot of the Palm City Bridge is a big two-story building there with green awnings, and that was our grocery store, that was our post office, and we could ride our bikes from out there where the Presbyterian Church is. We could ride our bikes and nobody would bother you. We could go up there and get candy or whatever, and Mother would get things that they needed, you know, and we could. Back then it was so quiet. Yep. And I did not go to school in Palm City. We finally, eventually, you know, all had to go to the Stuart High School at that time. And we rode a school bus. Mr. Markle drove the school bus from, and I think his road is still in Palm City, you know, Markle Road and Ludlam Road. Mr. Ludlam drove the bus to the church for Sunday school. And we went to the little congregational church out there in Palm City on the river. And he'd pick us up in his little old wooden station wagon and take us to church and Sunday school on Sundays. And so eventually my father, I have two brothers. And we got older, you know, and Daddy decided that he would maybe have to have a bigger house, because we had a tiny little house. My parents had a black iron stove to cook on. They had an ice box where the iceman would come and deliver our ice, and our milkman. And eventually they got, you know, an electric stove and so forth and so on. But finally, my father bought property, which is now across from the Martin County High School, right there. And he owned that whole piece of property from Cantor on to the river. And he built our home there. So we left Palm City when I was about maybe 11 or so. But Palm City was a wonderful time of life out there at that time. We had a good life out there. I don't think children today realize, you know, how much they have, as opposed to what people our age and maybe a little younger than I am, but you know, had such a good life out there.
And I remember I used to ride my bike out to your house, and we'd go to the swimming hole.
That's right, we did. Our house, our property backed up on Danforth Creek. I made a note about that and I forgot it. Our house backed up on Danforth Creek, where the Danforth residential area is right now. And we had a path back there through the palmettos and the pine trees and stuff. And we could go back there and swim in that creek every day, which we mostly did in the summertime. And Karen would she would ride out and we would go swimming in the swimming hole almost every day. Nobody bothered you, it wasn't contaminated, you know, and it was just, you know, it was a good thing to do on a nice summer day. But that was where Danforth, the residential area is now, was Danforth Creek. That was behind our house.
Did you ever see any gators back there?
What?
Did you ever see any gators?
No gators. We didn't worry about gators, and we didn't worry about snakes and things like that. We were young, and you know, you're not afraid. Nothing bothered you then. We just went and had a good time.
You know what they say about gators in Florida? You know, you can tell if there's a gator in Florida. You put your hand right there, you pull it out. If it's wet, there can be a gator there.
Well, I'm Dennis Yingling, and I wasn't born in Palm City either. We moved from Pennsylvania down here when I was 5, me and my brother Craig. We were both born in Pennsylvania, but we grew up in Palm City. And like she was saying, Palm City was one of the best places you could grow up in. And as far as swimming holes and sand spurs, we weren't allowed to wear our shoes. We had a pair of shoes for church and a pair for school. When you came home, they come off. And our feet were as tough as leather. We could walk through Sandsburg without a bit of trouble. And people would follow us doing it, and we just laugh at them and leave them standing there. But the swimming holes, there was a good one out at Bill Matheson's place. It was an artesian.
It's artesian well.
And that's where pretty much everybody went, except for up on All-American Boulevard. And talking about gators, if you could see them, we knew we were all right. So we would swim as long as you could see them. That wasn't too smart on our part. We're all still here, none of us got eat. And as far, let's see, we did a lot of camping. I mean, we camped almost every weekend someplace in Palm City. And then some of the boys we went to church with, Freddie and Lance Cale and Jimmy Van Tynen, we used to start going out on that island west of the bridge. And we built a log cabin out there, but we would go out in the summertime for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And we would eat whatever we could shoot with a BB gun. We never come back into town. And if you couldn't find a boat, if one of them didn't have a boat work, we'd swim across there to that island. But we camped almost every weekend. And I remember one of the notes here is if we ever got in any trouble. Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you some of the trouble we're allowed to tell you.
I can tell some.
They built a bomb shelter at the end of 2nd Street, between 2nd Street and 1st Street. And I guess we were maybe 10 years old. We finally broke the lock off of it because it started raining, so we got down in the bomb shelter to camp. And we lifted the lid up real slow to make sure nobody was there. And the one boy said, "This clear," and we opened it up. Well, there sat Slater Gross, Jim Mills, and Mervyn Waldron. So much for peeking out and finding the cops. I'm trying to think of anything else.
You know, you guys are just bringing up a lot of memories.
Yeah.
I remember my dad took off Jim Mills's dog's leg back in '65. He got bit by an alligator.
Yep.
My dad amputated that, so that was a great.
And that little store in the corner, Mr. and Mrs. Gerard.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was our bus stop. Yep. Yeah, we had 4 stores in Palm City. We had Gerard's, Ramey's, and you took your life in your own hands if you ever ate there.
Sunshine.
Sunshine Grocery,
Sunshine
and then
Grocery,
Shaw's
yeah.
Grocery up on 9th Street. Yep.
Yeah.
But Palm City was a good place.
That's after my
Yeah.
time.
Well, I think they've pretty well covered.
You gotta put it up to your mouth.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
They've covered a lot about Palm City. I was born in Palm City, or in Stuart, in 1943. And my father was born on an island between Palm City and Port St. Lucie. And I can't for the life of me think of it now. There is a memorial out there. And so I don't know what year their family came down here, but they had a sawmill out on the island and also a pineapple plantation. And they had to take a boat to get there, a ferry. And then in 1939, my dad decided they were going to move to Palm City. And I believe they moved there in 1940. And it was dirt roads, and even when I was young, it was mostly dirt roads. And it was a wonderful place. We could go anywhere. Matheson's Pond, played in the river. I mean, of course, we weren't supposed to be playing in the river, but we did. And it was wonderful back then, and it was still nice when I raised my children out there with these guys. Even they didn't spoil it.
Your name of your father
Was
that was
Cruz.
Henry Cruz.
And now I'm the only one left here. So,
Same with me.
but it was a great place. On stores in Palm City for a short time, and Tonette might remember, there was a Mr. Doman that had a store on Cornell for just a few years. And he was nice. Mr. Gerard was not nice.
She wasn't.
We did not like going down there. We were scared to death of them. And if we took pop bottles down, there better not be a speck of anything on them. But we were a little bit afraid of going down there. We didn't go a lot. Mr. Doman was really nice. But, and the first, I believe the first church was the one that was on 9th Street on 34th.
River.
And then in 1957, I believe, wasn't it, Joe, that they built Palm City Baptist? 1957, I think. And so a lot has changed. Same with the school. When I went to work and Nancy was there, and it was just, 8 classrooms? Six classrooms. And now there's, I don't know what the population is of the school, but I'm sure it's well over 600 students. And we had, one bus.
Another short bus.
And the whole time I went to school, there was only one bus that bused us from Palm City, from all the way out on the grade to Stuart High School. One bus, and it was sometimes not full. And we always liked it when the Palm City Bridge went up and wouldn't go down.
Yep.
Because that meant we got to go the long way around by the locks.
You went around the bridge.
That way we were late for school and nobody cared, and those were the good days.
You had brought up something, I was going to comment on it, and I forgot.
I was just going to say something. Going to Palm City School, Mrs. Crawford was my 3rd grade teacher.
She was mine, too.
Yep.
And I bet she remembers it.
She was the sweetest one, because coming from 2nd grade, Miss Wallace, who would choke you out if you looked at her wrong.
All right,
Miss Crawford's
be nice.
sweetheart.
She wasn't real nice, though.
I'm Forrest Yingling. I'm Dennis's brother. Him and my next down below him are the only 2 Yankee kids that they had here, so I'm not a Yankee. No, we were, I was born in 57, and my grandparents were Lee and Sadie DeLoach. They come down from Georgia, and that's on my mother's side. And they come from Georgia back, I can't even tell you when, but my mother was born in Salerno. Then my father, he came down with his parents when they were building their house on First Street, and come down every winter, because they did construction and stuff. But I was born, of course, Palm City didn't have a hospital, so I was born at Mark Memorial in 57. And getting back to the things in Palm City, you know, I can remember the water in the river being pretty clean. I don't remember it being clear, but you could see 4 foot. And my mother, she had told me one time that the Manatee Pocket was actually pretty much crystal clear, but when they cut that canal in, you know, the St. Lucie Canal, that's what ruined everything. But you know, growing up here was good. Like I say, we had Matheson's Pond. My brother had horses, and we would ride horses bareback all through Palm City, you know, in the summertime. Yeah, and you know, collecting pop bottles and all that, and taking them to the store. Of course, we always went to Sunshine, because Mr. Gerard, he was the one I thought was on the Fugitives. They were looking for him. I didn't go in there very much. The old black and white television didn't have a really clear picture. But no, it was a good time. We could go, like I say, go to Matheson's Pond, we go to the river. We fished in any place that held water. We hunted pretty much anywhere we wanted because nobody cared. We'd ride our bikes over to the causeway or the beach and fish, and there was just no hurry about anything because you couldn't go home and stay in the house because after you got up in the morning, you were basically booted out of the house and don't come back until supper. And because there were 7 kids in our family, so I don't know how my mother did it, poor thing. But yeah, that was a wad of boys, 6 boys and 1 girl. Yeah, so. But anyway, here you go, Mr. Johnny Layton, and he's got all kinds of
Oh, boy. Where do you begin?
Well, I was born in 42 at Martin Memorial. My dad built a house out on 5th Street. His parents had came down from Pennsylvania in 1913, and when they bought acreage out on the farm, they called it, they gave him 2 lots in town, and Dad bought the 2 lots from my grandmother. So he built us a house there, and we had horses. Well, 5th Street now is 30th Street.
Yeah.
We had 6 horses at the house, a milk cow, and a pig. And
That was Forrest's girlfriend.
Only look good in lipstick.
And we used to have bike races when you came off the old Palm City Bridge to the first cut off to the left, which the Waltons owned 2 houses there.
Cornell.
And back on Cornell and on the main Martin Downs Boulevard, now they call it. And we'd have bicycle races there.
Oh, yeah.
And you'd go to somebody's house to play, and wasn't many boys there. And there's Vince Higby, Bobby Wortham, Ed Bozone lived across the street. We had a big yard. We played football, baseball, or softball. And I moved to Stuart when I was 12, and then back to Palm City when I was 21. But we all had our own fun, and there wasn't many people out there. Mrs. Mallory was my Cub Scout teacher, and then Mr. Velma, not Velma, the Higby lady, Benson's mother.
She went in 3rd grade, Miss Higley. She was not a nice girl.
I don't know.
Oh.
And then we had Susan Krause from Krause and Crane.
Yes.
She was our dead mother for a few years. But growing up, Palm City was great. And my dad bought 100 acres in 46. And we had 130 head of cattle on it when he sold it. But he was always chasing cows.
You got cows, you.
But it was a great place to grow up. You knew everybody in the neighborhood, and trouble was called to your parents before you got home.
That's right.
There you go.
Yeah, try having another being chairman of the school board. Everybody's bringing up such great memories and talking about bicycles, and unfortunately, we didn't have bicycles, we just had horses. So we're always jealous of the kids that lived in what's called the old numbered streets, because they could ride their bicycles to somebody else's house. And before we could do that, of course, we had to call up the horses and brush them out and saddle them, and then we could ride in. And I remember very distinctly, we'd ride our horses to the base of the Palm City Bridge, Layton Park now, and there was a hitching post there, and we'd hitch the horses up, and we'd walk out on that catwalk, the old Palm City Bridge, and that little sandbar there on the other side of the channel. Perspective changes when you grow up, when you're older. When we were kids, we thought that was forever. We'd hitch horses up, walk across that catwalk, and then we'd swim all the way to that sandbar, and we'd play until the tide came up, and then we'd swim all the way across the channel, which is like from here to that door.
But we were always jealous. I remember we didn't ride the bicycles. We tried to ride bicycles from our house on 714. I think a lot of y'all remember that, you know, or Doc Hyatt, you know, where Dad had his place. And we tried to ride the bicycle. That was a main intersection there. That was the only way to get into Stuart was off the turnpike, 714. So 714, the map, that was the biggest intersection. And I think that's how my mama ended up winning her school board race. She and all the other mamas got out there one year and they had their picket signs because they didn't want their children riding to Palm City Elementary School with no sidewalk. So I still have pictures of my mom and all the other Palm City mamas. She's got her pantsuit on, and they were protesting. They wanted a sidewalk to get their kids to Palm City. But yeah, my dad was raised in Fort Lauderdale, Lauderdale High. Flying L's no longer there. University of Florida. Unfortunately, they did not have a veterinary school when he did Fort Lauderdale High. They did 2 years University of Florida, quit, worked on Babcock Ranch, and then, not quit, he had to get money, and then he did his BS, and then he had to work again, so he worked on Babcock Ranch, and then got his pre-med, and then went to work as a traveling drug salesman. In the meantime, then they didn't have a veterinary school here then, so he had to go to the University of Georgia, got a veterinary license, met my mom, and had 1, 2, 3 kids before he got his doctorate, moved back to Palm City. He was from Fort Lauderdale and wanted a smaller place, so moved out to Palm City, and yeah, like just all these great memories. Matheson Pond, we used to take the horses to all the ponds, and they were our diving boards. You know, we'd put the horses out there, we'd dive off, and then we'd climb up their tails, up their hocks, and, you know, dive off again. And this is, I brought a picture, it's kind of cute. The gators every year used to go in the back here, and there's a mud hole, and they'd lay their eggs, and then they'd come up to this pond every year when the babies when the babies hatched, they'd come up to that pond, and Daddy'd either fish them out and relocate them
To the dinner table.
Yeah, we called them wampus, you know. That's what Gigi Gonzalez and all called them wampus, because you know you couldn't eat gator meat.
Yeah.
You could eat wampus. But anyway, one year, that one picture's my sister there. He got one of those little baby gators, and he put a piece of tape on his nose and let us take it to Palm City Elementary for show and tell. So there it is. My sister holding up her little baby gator to show and tell. So anyway, then just great fun. Just a lot of old timers. Great fun.
Are there any questions?
I have one other
questions. Iris Wall, I read her book from Indiantown. And she was a cracker girl because the cows, I realized, were wild. So the cows that you had, were they wild, or did they import them into Florida?
No, they were just old scrub cows, but you could open the door and they'd climb in the car with you.
Where was Palm City? Like when you go over the bridge, all I remember is taking a left to go see some friends. Where were these first, second, third, fourth streets?
When you came off the bridge.
When you come off the bridge, make a left.
On that road that you
Yeah,
took.
take a left, so
Yep.
that's it.
There were 16 streets.
Okay.
They're now called 29th,
Yeah.
30th, 31st,
Is that
31st
Cornell?
Terrace.
Yep.
Off of
That's
Cornell.
Cornell, right over the bridge to the left is Cornell.
Yeah.
But
That's all
then
it
it was
was.
First Street, Second Street, Third Street.
We had 15 streets, and then the last one was All American Boulevard.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think 12th is now called
Every
Hard
other
Highway.
street was paved.
Yeah.
Paved, or did you put oil with stones?
No, there were stones put into
To the asphalt.
asphalt years ago.
And All American was, some kind of rough. It had the real high stones sticking
Yeah.
up.
I think the
Couldn't
street I
walk
live
on it.
on, 36 Terrace, is still, it's about that wide, and it's still, I think, they're on an original I think it was 13th.
Now, when you go over the bridge, so you say to the left is town. When did Lighthouse Point get built?
That was there also.
Yeah, it's always been there.
Yeah. It was built
No,
later.
Lighthouse Point was, no.
No, that was built in the,
That was later.
that was in
In the
the
50s.
mid-60s.
Yeah, early 60s, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was in the 60s?
yeah.
When you came across that bridge, you went to Map Road,
Yep,
you either went left or right. You
okay.
didn't go straight.
It was
I think it was
Madison.
1984,
Madison, right.
Peter Cummings bought that whole bit that's now called Martin Downs and built Martin Downs Boulevard. But
Palm
back
City
there,
really
there was,
changed.
yeah, Crane Creek Ranch, Bill Matheson
Dairy
had
Ranch.
Crane Creek Ranch, that wasn't a country club.
Yeah.
And there was no road to it, you had to
Right,
get
I
there.
remember you had to take a left or right.
Yep.
If you took a right when we were growing up, the road ended at Map Road, which is Map Road now. There was no road there when we were kids.
I think the
You
only,
went to the right.
to the right was, where Julia Lane was.
Was it like the
Murphy Road.
library where there were
Mr.
flowers?
Gibson.
When you took that left or right at Map, that empty spot, there weren't flowers being grown.
No, it
Now, that's
was- it was
Berry
a
Road. Berry Road is Flower
Lave
Farm.
Dairy is who owned that property. And it was a big dairy property and they had a lot of cows.
Berry Road was their flower farm.
I have just one more question. My husband came down in 1965 with two other, not with two, but two other young guys from West Virginia came down. They taught in Indiantown at Warfield. And the first year, he said, we stayed in shacks in Palm City. Where did they live? Meagerly, of course, in Palm City in shacks.
That could have been anybody's house back then.
What was your husband's name?
Johnny was asking, what's your husband's name?
He was Jim Kelly. And Jim Ross was another one. And, Steve Viola was the third.
Okay, they came out of West Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
And did you teach with Jim too?
Jim who?
Ross.
He lived in Pump City.
He lived, yeah.
Yeah.
The kids went to Palm City.
Yeah, Scott and
Kelly?
Kelly.
Kelly, the last name you said?
No.
No, Kelly Ross.
Ross, okay.
Those are Jim's children.
Yeah.
Probably at home, but I don't have any. But he had when my husband was dying a couple of years ago, I found this book on your grandma, or I'm your grandpa, and our grandchildren are very little, just 2, 5, and 7, so I wanted a history. And I asked him if I asked the questions to write them down. Anyway, one question in particular was, what affected, now here's an 82-year-old man at this point, something about what affected you most in your life. And he said Indiantown, and I knew it, you know, because he was kind of lost in Massachusetts. And I don't know how he stumbled into teaching in Indiantown. And this one woman, so I hope to meet her and see who she is, a black woman, a black kid. And he said she was strong and bright, and I can't remember exactly, but I brought that book down.
Last name?
What's her name?
Brunella McIntyre. And her son or grandson was on a major football team.
Yeah, McIntyres are still out there, but I don't know if she's
Yeah,
still
she
alive.
is. It's just that
In Indiantown.
I haven't met her yet.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank
you, that was great.
I just wanted to say too, in Palm City, I'm a little bit before a lot of this. And not one person has mentioned the wooden Palm City Bridge. And when we had to learn to drive, my parents, you know, and they had to go to town once in a while, that bridge was such a rickety bridge. You don't forget that bridge. And I don't remember the date when they started building the Palm City Bridge that is now. But nobody's mentioned that that bridge was treacherous to have to drive over.
Especially if you were on the school bus.
Yeah, if
Big
we were on the
truck
bus,
coming.
you know, and stuff like that. Nobody mentioned that bridge, but we dreaded going back and forth
I
across
remember
that
the
Palm
horses
City
did
Bridge.
not like to go across that.
I know.
They would not go across that
I
bridge.
know, and
My
they
mom
finally-
would
I
not
know.
go across that, there's a semi.
When my parents had to drive across that bridge, it was like, you know, bumpity, bumpity, bumpity.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to mention that because I haven't heard it mentioned. Most of them have grown up after we left. We left Palm City, I guess, when I was about maybe 11 or something. Daddy built our home over right across from Martin County High School back there on the river. And we moved out of Palm City, and then all the growth began, you know, and Martin Downs came along, and it's not what it used to be. But you don't forget that Palm City Bridge.
That bridge is so narrow that we fished off of it
Yeah.
as kids. And when
Well,
a
I
semi come by, you had to bend over.
Yeah,
before
and
the
I can
marriage
remember the
slapped
school
you.
bus,
Yeah.
when another truck was coming this way and we're coming this way. Sometimes the truck had to back up. And lots of times, you could look out the window of the school bus and we'd have this much from the railing. It was
Yeah.
scary.
And there wasn't much of a railing, I mean, you were
Yeah.
off.
Mr. Cadwell used to drive the bus, he'd scrape the bolts every morning if he passed somebody.
That bridge was also very treacherous. There was more than one car that went through the railing and ended
Oh,
up in
yeah.
the river.
The Nipper boys.
And I remember when I was very young, they were out there dragging the river,
Yeah.
looking for bodies because a car had gone through, and I was standing there watching when they pulled one of them up.
Yep, we were there. We were there when they pulled the body out. That was the Nipper boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was treacherous. That bridge was very treacherous. That incidentally, the bridge tender lived in the little house out on the bridge.
Yes, he did.
And he parked his car down at the end, and he'd walk out to his house, and the kids always got a kick out of it because you could always tell when one of them, he or his wife, had gone to the bathroom because there was just a pipe coming down.
So much for a clean river.
Like a little bit of put things in proportion here. I looked up the census figures for. Looked up the census figures. You can't get the census figures for Palm City because it wasn't incorporated. But Martin County, in 1940 census had 6,295 people. That's the whole county.
Wow.
1950 there was 7,807. By 1960 it had a little more than doubled. It was up to almost 17,000. Now in 2024 it was almost 165,000. So 2024 the population of Martin County was approximately 26 times what it was in 1950. And it was a wilderness. It was the frontier. I mean, we lived there right off Cornell, right at 6th Street. And I can remember when I was a kid, I was 12 years old when I bought my .22 rifle. And you could go out, I went out in my backyard and shot tin cans in the backyard. Well, you don't do that now.
Someone told me about the population in 1975, and I still remember this. They told me, they said, you know, we double in population every 10 years. And I went, no. And it has held to be true. From 65 to 75, we doubled. 75 to 85, that figure doubled. 85 to 95, that figure doubled. So it is just mind-boggling when you look past, like you were saying, past like probably 1960, we doubled every 10 years.
I love it when I hear these people say, well, I moved here in 1975, and it was such a lovely little town. And I said, try 1945 when it was paradise.
Exactly.
It was paradise.
I found, and I think all the locals do, people, you know, they move here, and by doing so, they contribute to the traffic and the growth and the overall congestion. And right about the 9-year mark, when they're here about 9 years, they start griping about the traffic, the growth, and the overall congestion, the same things that they contributed to.
Does anybody on the panel remember who owned Gerard's store before they bought it?
What?
Gerard's store.
They're on the corner.
The corner of Cornell and
Yeah,
the bottom of the
that
bridge.
was Joe owned it.
Fred Jost.
Fred Joe.
He had the dairy out on Loop Road,
Yeah.
which the Moore brothers bought.
Yeah.
When we, there's a more in
There's
the,
more in the crowd.
more in the crowd right there.
Are you Harvey's son?
Son, yeah.
Because there was Newt, Harvey, Doc, and Ed. There's 4 brothers.
When we came down here, the business district of Palm City was when you came off the bridge right there at the corner of Cornell, there was an old wooden 2-story building.
Yeah, Fred Joseph owned
Yeah,
that.
it had a general store, it had the post office, and it had 1 gas pump out in front. That was the business district of Palm City. And then they tore that down soon after that.
49 storm
Hurricane
blew it down.
took it down.
Well, everything blew away in
No, right
49.
on the current there where Ross was.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll be back.
There was a 2-story building.
The lot that our grandfather was, you talked about the lots, that your father bought the lots that were given by Chillingsworth.
Yes.
Okay, the one that granddaddy had, I don't know how he got it from the rest of the family because he had all kinds of brothers and sisters, but he ended up with that lot. It was on 32nd Street, and the Klubens, I don't know if you remember
Yeah.
the
Yes.
Klubens. Okay, they lived in the little house was one of the houses that they brought up from the base in Hope Sound,
Yeah, the Army.
the Army base.
Camp Murphy.
Camp
yeah.
Murphy.
Camp Murphy.
And so that's what he put on there was a little, but it's a new house there now. I drove by the other day and it's no longer
We have
there.
a question.
Yeah, this lady here.
Yeah, my parents moved here in 1950. My dad came with Grumman Aircraft.
Mhm.
And they had, Dad needed places for the people coming down from New York to live in. And they stayed in a place called Sailfish Lodge. Does
Yep.
anybody know
Yes.
anything
Yep.
about that?
Yes.
It's on Ninth
Is it
Street.
still there?
No,
No, it's been gone for years.
It was there by the church. on
that
the
was
Yeah.
right down the
Yeah.
street
Yeah, I
from
was
where
trying
we,
to picture
Yeah.
where it was.
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I was a baby when they came.
well, there's nothing there.
Oh, they used to give us kids the most wonderful Christmas party. there.
Yes,
Every year was a
yes.
Christmas party.
And I don't know if you remember or not, Karen, but in the off-season, we were allowed to go down and play shuffleboard.
Yes, yes.
And allowed to go inside and
Yes.
play table tennis.
Yes, we went in there.
And they had a card room, a game room, board games.
I remember, and it had a beautiful fireplace in it.
Yes, right in the
I
center.
remember that.
Right in
And
the
I
center.
remember they raised chinchillas.
Yes, they did.
Yes, they had
Yeah.
a
And I
chinchilla
still
ranch.
remember that, and don't ask me how.
Yeah.
But when the
I
Rose
was
came
really
down,
little.
Brad, local kids were allowed in.
Oh, no, we weren't allowed to go down there during the season. We knew better.
I love to tell a newcomer that, oh yes, I'm from Palm City. I said, you know, when I was a kid, we used to skate at the foot of the bridge, and they look at you like you've absolutely lost your mind. We did. Every 15 or 20 minutes, we'd say, oh, there's a car coming, and we'd all get out of the road, and then we'd get back. We had our hopscotch there and our skates. Remember, Joey?
You mentioned you were swimming in Matheson Pond, you said?
Yeah.
Where was that?
Out in his cow pasture, he had an artesian
Is it
flowing well.
out kind
It's
of?
almost where Sand Hill Cove is right now.
Well,
Sand Hill Cove, yeah.
Yeah,
He had one there and he had one out in the cow pasture.
right, before you get to Sand Hill.
Armalini
Oh, yeah.
Road, if you went all the way out, there was a cattle guard there, which
Yeah.
the cows couldn't jump. And then you went out through his cow pasture and he put those wells in because he grew tomatoes and he would clear the field off and then he'd plant grass for his cattle.
So that's all gone now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's also one off of Murphy Road that we wouldn't let them come to. That was ours. So, it was across from Matheson's house there.
My other question was, does anybody have a memory of 1959, 1960, when the discharges were 4 times what they were in 2016? There's some- That's the highest that the river had ever gotten.
I
From
guess from the
the-
lake.
Yeah.
Oh, from the lake, you mean?
Why when those sandbars got kind of extended out there by the Palm City Bridge?
They were put there with a dredge.
Yeah,
They
with a
used to
dredge.
dredge the channel every year, and that's Spoil Island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the first protest I went to about the discharges in 1974 out in Phipps Park. 74, so it's a long time.
That bridge they were talking about, if you happen to be up there fishing and 2 tractor trailers happen to meet,
Nope.
You climbed
You went
on the
swimming.
side.
You went swimming.
There wasn't enough room, because there was only like a railroad tie at the bottom of the
That you
railing.
stood on.
That's
Yeah.
what you stood on. And if they come by, they were bouncing across that railroad tie, and you threw your pole in and you jumped in.
They say this picture is a little remnant of that old bridge, just a remnant when they were tearing it down. And it really, like they're saying, it was,
Yep.
Man,
it was railroad ties, rickety railroad ties, and
we didn't have air conditioning growing up, so after about 7:30 at night, there was no traffic coming into Palm City or out. But any car you come across, you could tell somebody was coming or going.
Yep.
You heard
You
them.
knew who was in it.
Yeah.
5 o'clock.
Yeah.
When I was dating, and when I was in high school, I was engaged to a boy in Fort Pierce, and he'd bring me home 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I would stand at the door till I heard him drive across that bridge. And it's clunk, 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 clunk.
Then you hit the draw span.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mother, when I was in high school, I had a job in a grocery store in Stuart after school, and I had a motorcycle. And my mother said she could always tell when I was coming home because she could hear my motorcycle coming across the Palm City Bridge.
Does anybody remember, probably, because I think it was at Kenridge when they brought the Clydesdale, Budweiser Clydesdale horses there with the wagon?
The grocery store there in Colorado.
Yeah. You remember it?
I do.
Good, I wasn't hallucinating.
No, you're not.
I knew I saw him.
I don't remember what year it was.
I was young, I was probably 6.
I got a couple of pictures. It was real funny because the old Christmas parades, Daddy get all the horses. That's one picture, Daddy and my mom made all the blankets. We all matched, and we had a sign called the Hyatts.
Yeah.
We had our horses, and that was a big thing. We marched in the Christmas parade every year. That was not much going on.
So most of the traffic in Palm City was the exiting off of the turnpike,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yes, it was.
Really?
The only way
That's
they
what
used
I
to call it
remember.
the gateway to Martin County, because it's the only way you could get in and out of Martin County.
Yeah.
When
But
they
you were
built the
talking
turnpike.
about Mrs. Ludlam out there. She was our school bus driver, and she'd be in prison today, but if you cut up on her bus, she pulled over and put you out. And it didn't matter where you were at, your butt got put out inside the road. And then when you got home, your parents tore your butt up again.
Yep.
Mr.
I was
Markle
telling-
would do that too.
Yep.
I
Yes.
was telling Lear and Paul out there where they've got that house on Map Road now, that John Layton, good friend Paul, what the hell's it, Felipe. I said, that was it. We went out to the end of Map Road, Miss Ludlam, and there's a chicken farm there. And that's where she U-turned.
Yep.
And came back.
Back.
Yeah, I was trying to tell them where they live right now, and I was telling John, so that was it, that was the end of the road.
Winnie has a question. Do any of you remember the 3 boys that was killed on Palm City Bridge?
Nippers.
And Camel.
The
You
nippers.
remember them?
2 nippers and a camel.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't remember their names, but it was the old bridge.
Yeah.
Yep.
They had just dropped off one of the boys over near where the high school is now. He lived over there. And then they headed for Palm City, and the rest of them got killed. He was, I'm trying to think what his name was, but he was one blessed boy, let me
Yeah.
tell you.
Talking about the bridge, he was talking about the island to the south of the bridge. Well, there was a big sandbar going to that island from them dredging out the channel. And we got to where we'd go out there on that island and dove, not even on the island, on the sandbar and dove hunt, because you could shoot them birds going to roost and they'd float. No, the ringneck or the regular dove.
Oh, dove.
Yeah, dove. And we did that for a couple years until somebody happened to move down from somewhere and started complaining we were killing all these birds, and the only one we were killing was a dove. But he couldn't eat his supper. It made him so sick. But, so that ended that.
Then he shot at us.
That was the beginning of the end.
That was, yeah.
And also, sorry about that.
Well, listen,
Filming.
When was the bridge, the old wood bridge built?
Oh my
Because I remember the Gilsons lived out there, and they used to, he talked about how they took a boat back and forth.
1919.
My father worked for Mr. Gilson for 15
Gilson
years.
is up.
And when there was a storm that, well, the 49 hurricane,
Yeah.
they had to go by boat.
Yeah, they go.
And their boat turned over one day, and my dad just about drowned.
Well,
But the
1919,
bridge was there in
1920.
49.
Oh, yeah, yeah, oh, it was
just read
torn
it
up. That
someplace.
hurricane really did trip on that bridge.
1919 is what that.
1919 was,
Well,
yeah.
they built it in
There was a
1919.
There was a ferry that went across before that, and then 1919.
I took, my friend Sharon and I, which she was in her Rambler, and took Tonette's sister, Sarah, home. And it was late at night, you know, but curfew, maybe 10 o'clock. And we come back over the Palm City Bridge, and this lady was in front of us, and she's weaving around. Don't pass her, Sharon, don't pass her. So we come up to the Palm City Bridge, and boy, the bridge thing was down for, and then was the turnstile.
Yeah.
And she went right through there, and so we stopped, and she didn't go off the bridge, but then I found out there's another way to get to Palm City, like you said, when you had to go around the bus. I never knew about that way.
That's why.
So we had a CB,
During the war over there?
her dad, she had a CB, her dad, that we were late to watch.
That's why they called it Loop Road, because it went around.
And I don't think it ever got stuck, or if we didn't know about it. I suppose it did.
One more question. Was the Ashley gang ever over there? I mean,
In Palm City?
yeah, they're in Palm City, wasn't
Well, I
Palm.
thought-
I think Palm City was too mean.
I was
for
gonna
the
say, there were
Ashley
two
gang.
trains come over there.
What?
Palm City was too mean for the Ashley gang. They hung out in Solano.
I haven't heard the good stories. There are a lot of good stories about Palm City. And
Does anybody remember the Arundel shops during the war?
Yeah.
My mother was a plane watcher, and she would take us with our little lunch, and we'd go out there, climb the tower. That big tower was out there for a long time, and she was a plane watcher out there at the Arundel shops. That's now a big marina, I think, out there on the canal now. But that was an active place back then when we were young in Palm City.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Okay, guys.
Thank you all. Thanks for your time.